everything that's in it. But just note that my earlier presentation is in there as well. So I'm going to have to flip through that one real quick to get to the one that we're actually looking at right now. So the Docheo Center at the University of Idaho, which I'm the director of, is a place where we explore technology for educational purposes. And so a lot of my exploration has to do with making classes better for faculty and students. And this is something that I've been doing for a couple years, lending cameras to faculty so that they can test them out for especially their online and hybrid teaching environments to see if they're useful for their purposes. And that way they can, before going out and spending $1,200 on something or $800 on something, decide if it's really the thing that's going to fit their needs. And I do this across campus so that faculty in a certain department, if they decide, oh, they really love this one kind of technology, then they can purchase it knowing ahead of time what it's going to do for them. So it's a lending program that I set up a couple years ago, and I'm going to go through some of the cameras that we utilize for that, but also talk about the background. So our campus before, what, 2 years ago, did not have a go-to for video conferencing. People were using 12 different kinds of video conferencing tools. They were having horrible experiences. They did not enjoy it. They griped. They didn't want to teach hybrid or online classes. And so we eventually went to Zoom, kind of tested it out campus-wide. A lot of people started utilizing it and being like, this is so much better than what I used to use. And we heard it over and over and over and over again. So recently, as of what, like last week, the university got a wide site license. That should say site-wide, sorry. A site-wide license, okay? So everybody now has access to a pro account. Before we had a limited amount of pro accounts. People were able to get them, but just not everyone. So that's not an issue anymore. One of the advanced features in Zoom, I do all the Zoom trainings on campus, so I like to point out some of the things that people could really leverage to improve their class situations. And even if they're using Zoom to record lectures, because we have faculty that do that too. They use it as sort of a lecture capture, okay? So one of those advanced features is the share dual camera feature. Okay, and when you go into share a dual camera in Zoom, you can flip back and forth between two cameras. But a lot of faculty don't realize that that is there because it's in the advanced settings and you have to turn it on in order for it to function. All right, so as long as they turn it on and they learn, oh, I have to just click this button and it flips back and forth between my two cameras, then that becomes a whole different thing that they can put into their teaching methods. Okay, so I also have a whole page of Zoom training documentation, and I do training on Zoom at different levels. So I train faculty, I train staff, I train people who have to support. I did a Zoom training for ITS to have the ITS folks look at it from the perspective of this is how you need to support the instructor, and these are the things that the instructor might need to use, like breakout rooms and dual cameras and those kinds of things. And then I also do one for our PDL partners, so people that come on campus to do trainings for us that might not even be U Idaho folks. So the need that I was seeing, this is where this all comes from, right? I don't go out and look for technology for no reason. Usually I have some kind of purpose in mind. The need that I was seeing for hybrid courses where we might have 10 to 12 students on campus and then we have a bunch of people connecting from a distance. A lot of our graduate programs look that way, but there are some other programs that look that way as well. So they wanted more intimate interactions, right? If you're that distant student, you always have the biggest gripe is, well, we can't see the people that are talking in the class, and so we don't even know who they are. We can't see faces. So it's just, you know, you kind of get lost when you're in that situation. Seeing the local participants is really big deal. And then options for delivering content was a big deal as well. So just thinking through, and that's where that dual camera thing comes in. And then we have a lot of instructors that do experiential learning type of things. Okay, they're teaching very interesting courses where they might want to be doing some stuff outside, or they might want to be doing some stuff that's really active, but they need to find a way to display that somehow within their course. So recording in the field is a good example. We have several faculty who do that. Being able to record in a hands-free way so that they can still be manipulating things, or, you know, riding a bike or paddling a boat or whatever they need to do while they're recording. And they also were very interested in the first-person perspective of that recording. So these are the devices that I think some of the ones that we found most successful. The Panicast, and I'll show you what it looks like live in a second here because I have it plugged in, is plug and play. Okay, so anything that's plug and play, I can lend to faculty. They're not going to have a hard time figuring out how it works on their device. I'm not going to get something that's not that easy because that will cause me way more headache than it's probably worth. Okay, but they can very easily borrow this thing. It's a panoramic view, so it gives them a full 180 shot. So we use these in a lot of conference rooms in the College of Education, Health and Human Sciences building. And we also use them at our little learning pods in the active learning classrooms. Okay, so really nice picture. And there is, you can get one that you have a mount for, but you can also get one on a base so that I can lend this one out to faculty very easily and they can use it in whatever way they need to. So pretty easy setup. So what does that look like? Let's see. That's this one. There we go. Okay, so that's the Panicast. If there's people sitting the whole way around, you're going to get a much better picture, obviously. But it's kind of hard to tell whenever you're in this situation. The next one, which is the absolute 100% favorite, and everybody wants one of these, but there's some things that I have to walk them through before they go buy one. So this is the Meeting Owl. Does anybody have a Meeting Owl? Yeah, these are amazing. They're just an amazing, easy thing. Plug and play. They're 360 video conferencing camera. It auto pans to whoever is speaking, and it will split the screen up to 3 times if there are multiple people speaking at the same time. So it just does this automatically. And it's a very smooth process. And the 360 view is always at the top of the screen. So you always get to see what's going on in that 360 view, but then you'll have the split screens down below. Very smooth. And I think what faculty like about this so much is they don't have to worry about what the camera is doing. The camera just follows things, right? Which you can do that with the Panicast to some degree as well. But let me show you what that one looks like on here. So that's the way it is right now, but you can see the 360 at the top of the screen. If somebody out there were talking and its audio were turned on, then it would start to, you know, move around based on who was talking. One of the things you have to think about with this is how big of a group are you talking about, right? And I'll go through some other issues that you have to think about with this one as well. But we do have several faculty that borrow those on a regular basis. I have one faculty member, who wants his department to purchase one, but has been borrowing one every Tuesday and Thursday all semester for his class. He has a small hybrid class, and he just loves it. And the students at a distance have given him like such strong feedback on the experience of using that as to what they were doing previously, that's the reason why he wants to keep it around. Another thing I tested out, so this is a Hue, and we can pass this one around. This is a really simplistic, again, plug-and-play camera, but the idea behind this one is we have a lot of faculty who want to write stuff down and have that be part of their recording, and they might not have a device that they can annotate on and use the Zoom annotation screen. And especially if it's a chemistry or math person, I don't even try to make them go there. They like to write on paper. So having a portable, easily portable document camera for them, this is perfect. I also have faculty that will use this. A lot of faculty will record things or teach their class on their laptop. And that camera's like right in your face all the time, which is really annoying. And I don't know, you feel like people can see up your nose or something. It's really annoying. So they'll hook this up instead, and it'll be like off to the side or farther out in front of them. And it's not such a strange looking shot, and it makes them feel more comfortable. So that's the Hue camera. The flexible neck definitely helps. Being able to pull in that documentation piece if you want to. Zooming in on objects, anybody that's teaching where they're actually using something physical or manipulative, you can zoom in on this and get a really close shot of whatever you're working with. And then the last one, and this one's the farthest out there, but gets used the most. These are pivot heads. Anybody have a set of pivot heads? Okay, so these are glasses that record video and take pictures. And I'm involved with a huge research project on them right now, and have been playing with these for about 5 years now. So they've been around for a while. The original version, which is this version, and I'll just pass them around so you can take a closer look at them, I think is down to like $130 now. It originally was $200. And then the smart version, which gives you the ability to live stream, it's tap activated instead of a push button. That version is around $300, okay? You can't even get your own private streaming channel, but you have to pay extra for it. You get a free streaming channel when you buy the smart version, but you know, how many, in a K-12 environment, I do a lot of stuff with K-12 schools, I can't go stream stuff. So I have to be very careful about that. But this is just pretty much click forward and record. A monkey could learn how to use these, and that's a very good thing when we're dealing with people that are out in the field and they don't want to deal with the struggle of a camera. I say you click forward to start and you click forward to stop, and that's it. And these get really, we get great feedback on these. So these are hands-free because all I'm doing is clicking once and then it's recording for me. People tend to forget that they're wearing them. Okay, even if you're collecting data and you're interacting with other people will forget that you're recording them. And so you get some pretty interesting footage sometimes. And then also having that first-person point of view is pretty interesting. You'll notice on these, however, that the camera is right between the eyes. Okay, so right here. So when you're recording, you really have to think ahead at what you want to capture. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit because I have a kind of lessons learned about each of these. So I'll start with the pivot head and go backwards. You need to practice with that field of vision with the pivot head. That camera's right here, so it's getting stuff here, but it's not getting anything down here. Okay, so I have a lot of faculty who will say, oh, I want to demonstrate something and I'm going to use the pivot heads. Well, that's great, but when you record to demonstrate, you have to physically put your head down because the camera is not going to see what's down below you just because you can see it by putting your eyeballs down. Okay, so people really need to get used to that. The first couple times I used them to demonstrate stuff, there was nothing in my picture. It was just me talking. Yeah. Also very fun device. So I encourage faculty the first time that they borrow a pair to just go out and do something fun with them. Like if you're riding a bike, wear them on your bike trip or wear them skiing. And I get all these crazy videos sent to me from faculty of things that they've done. When I took them home for the first time, because that's a lot of these technologies I don't have time to play with at work, so I buy them, I take them home, I play with them for a couple weeks, then I bring them back and start implementing. I handed them off to my son, who's now 13. At the time, he would have been, wow, probably 8 or 9 the first time he played with these. He strapped them to my dog. Yeah, and took the dog for a hike. And let me tell you, if you want to get sick watching a video really quickly, my dog running through brush, it was kind of crazy. But there's so many other things that you can think about doing with them. There is a noise. It will pick up wind noise, because when you're in the outdoors, if that wind noise is going, the microphone is built in. There's no way to attach an external microphone, so you really are going to get some feedback. If it's a nice day, no worries, but if it's a windy day, there will be some issues there. The meeting owl. I love that thing. Faculty love that thing. The one problem, and I'm actually going to contact them about this, is there's no way to make it a permanent fixture in a conference room. There's no way to bolt it down. If I made a frame for it of some sort, it would have to go over top, and that's going to conflict with the cameras. So right now, that's kind of an issue. So I really want to be able to fix that in some way. I also get a lot of people that just love it so much that they try to think of these really unrealistic ways in which to use it. Like, I want to put this in the middle of my classroom and it will just go. And I'm like, it's really not meant for that, right? Like, first of all, where in the middle of your classroom are you going to build a platform to put this thing on, right? And it's USB, so you have to plug it in to something. So I get a lot of people that come up with these ideas of just the way that they want to use it. And I'm like, maybe in the future there's something else, but I don't think it's this. So you have to go sort of guide them through those things. So really not good for larger groups. I mean, it's really meant to be on a table that people are sitting around and you can see everybody that's there. Small classroom, yes. We can do it in a smaller size classroom that fits maybe, we've done it in a class of 12 to 15, and that worked pretty well. But in a bigger group, it's really not ideal. The Panicast, we haven't had too many problems with Panicast, but occasionally there's a firmware update. And what happens when we update the firmware, Greg? Yeah. Yeah, sometimes when we update the firmware, then things stop working, and then we have to figure it out with our existing system and just integrating things. The other issue that we had, when we mounted these on the table, there's this cable, right? And so we were mounting them on tables similar to the table out here, where it's a learning pod, and you've got the screen attached to the end of the table. The cables were getting crushed behind the screen. And so we're like, okay, how do we make that stop happening? Because it was essentially making our cameras not work anymore. Matt, who is in Greg's group of CTS, he created some little spacer on, I think he found one in Thingiverse and manipulated it to make it the right size. And then we 3D printed them, and we stuck one behind each screen so that the screens wouldn't get pushed back enough to smash the cables. So there were a couple little issues like that, but overall, really nice device, and we have them in most of our conference rooms in the College of Education. And then I have a lot of other people that see them in there, and they're like, oh, that's what we're going to get, right? Price-wise, we'll talk about that for a minute. I told you pivot head prices, right? So that's not a big deal. These guys, the Hughes, I'm going to say like $60, somewhere in there, maybe 70. They're not that expensive. The Meeting Owl, 800, okay, which totally worth it to me. But I don't have faculty members that are going to buy one for themselves. I have people that will say, let's get one of these for the department, and then they, you know, pass it around within the department, but not for themselves. And then the Panacast, we're talking more like, what do you think for a Panacast, Greg? Yeah, 11, I'd say between 1,000 and 1,200, somewhere around there, okay? So between the 4 of those types of cameras, I've had a lot of success with faculty doing different things in their classrooms. And I think that's what we want to see, right? We want to see them innovate. We want to see them delivering content more effectively. Honestly, when I tell a faculty member that they can switch back and forth between 2 cameras, that opens up like a completely different world for them. And they get so excited when they find that out. And that's why I do regular trainings and try to get people on board. I also find that if I train ITS and I train staff and I train everybody else and show them those features, then they'll tell the faculty members who don't have time to come to a training, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And then again, it just kind of creates all of these different situations. Interesting projects right now, so I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're doing with the pivot heads, because that's tied to research that I'm doing too. I'm actually considered faculty as well. So we have a faculty member at our Boise campus, and he is in bioregional planning, so he's part of College of Art and Architecture. And he teaches these courses on bioregional planning, and one of the projects he's working on right now is making Boise a safer bike city, okay? It's not bad. It's very popular to bike in Boise, but there are high, how do I say this, high accident areas between cars and bikes, okay? So he has been trying to map those areas and research what is happening in those specific areas and how can we deal with it. And his students will look at data. So he used to use something called, what is it, a windshield map, I believe, which is basically he was getting data from the windshield of a car on what was happening in these areas, okay? So it was only the car perspective. Now he's using the pivot heads so that he can get the car perspective and the bike perspective. And his students are able to look at the data in a more logical way to decide what really was the issue here, because before we could only see what was happening with the car. We couldn't see what was happening with the bike. So he's been using them like crazy, and it's part of his research. I'm collaborating with a couple faculty at Virginia Tech with the pivot heads, and they're from the social studies department, social studies education, and we have a teacher, a K-12 teacher that teaches geography who goes to Antarctica for a project every summer. And so she is going to utilize these as part of her project. So I'm sending them to her on Monday. And they also have some different projects going on at Virginia Tech with them that are all social studies education. So essentially what we're looking at overall with this device is inquiry-based learning, right? Being able to look at situations from a first-person point of view, and then being able to go back and look at the video of that situation. And, you know, just things as simple as, what did I miss when I had that conversation? Or what did I miss when I witnessed an event? You know, so being able to go back and look at what happened from your point of view. So some pretty interesting things with those. I have so many faculty who, if I bring these things out and let them play with them, which that's what the Docheo Center is for, I'll set these up and they can come in and learn how to use them while they're in the lab, and then they can take one with them and borrow it and be able to utilize it. They come up with such interesting ideas, that things I would have never thought of. The other pivot head use I'm seeing in experiential learning, we have a faculty member who teaches about the environment, okay, and pollution. And so she goes out in the field with the pivot heads every week and actually videotapes things that she is seeing so that her students will become more aware spotting pollution and recognizing things within the environment. And it just works really well for her. She was trying to do it before with her cell phone and a little mini tripod, one of those ones that you wrap around the tree and that whole deal. And now all she has to do is click a button. So it's so much easier in that way. So questions? I know it's the end of the day. It's the cube.
Two of these are pretty expensive. If they fall in love with one of those, then you mentioned that somebody checked it out every week for the whole semester or something, but so you're pretty solid on, you just try this out, and if it's something that you like, you hit up your department chair for some funding for it then, right?
Yeah, so with the pivot heads and with this, people will buy those on their own, or they'll buy them with the little mini funding that they get, you know, with whatever. But the Meeting Owl and the Panasonic, or the Panacast, they really do look at it in that way, like, well, how can I get, so usually what they do is they take it to a department meeting and they start using it in that way, and then everybody else likes it too, and they're like, we need one of these, right? So if you get the department chair in on that, then they usually find money to buy one. So I'm going to say there are 3 or 4 departments now that have purchased one since borrowing it or seeing it. I wouldn't have known about this device if Greg hadn't gone to Infocom in Florida. So when Greg sees a neat technology, he emails me and says, look at this thing. Should we try this out, right? Because I have money to just buy it and play with it. And so in this case, I was just so enthused by even looking at the possibilities of what it could do. I bought 2 of them. I gave one to Greg. I kept one at the center, and we both tested it out. So he's testing it out from the IT perspective. I'm testing it out from the instructional perspective or meeting room perspective. And between the 2 of us, we were like, this thing's awesome, right? And so we started telling people about it. So once you spread the word, if enough people in your department start to see it, then they'll push too. Yeah, so they're not the lowest cost things, but what they can accomplish and what they can do in terms of improvement. I also will argue with faculty who will say, well, we can't afford that. I'll say, well, can you afford to fly to Boise? Because people fly to Boise for meetings all the time. And I'm like, why are you spending all that money to fly to Boise when you could just meet virtually and make it just as effective probably as what it was with you being there in person? So you can argue things like that, you know, if you look at it in terms of travel costs and how it could be making those situations better, then you probably do have the money for it. Nice.
Quick question about the hue. So I've got a situation where a faculty member, you know, there's a video capture of some kind in the room, but they want to capture their whiteboard that's not set up. Would the hue work for that? Is the resolution good enough to try and capture a whiteboard that they're writing on?
It would depend on how stable you got the hue. And I mean, it does a pretty good job, and you can adjust it. You can zoom it and focus it and things like that, so it's manual. Okay. But so every time I get a faculty member who tells me that, like, I have to write on the whiteboard, I tell them that there is a document camera, and the document camera can connect to Zoom. Because trying to capture a whiteboard, you often, too, get a glare, and that's not good for the person at the far end. And in our college, most of our, well, all of our whiteboards are glass. So they have the white behind them, but they're all glass, so you can get a glare off of those. So I recommend to them that they try an alternative method. I will say, you know, this is why we have a document camera in this classroom. That Zoom can be, you can integrate your document camera into Zoom as well and have that be one of the things that you're showing on the screen. I have a lot of people, too, that will try to do something like that, and I'll notice that they're using a Surface Pro. And I'm like, well, Zoom has annotation in it. Did you know it has annotation? You can write right on your screen. Or I'll say, do you have an iPad? Because you can connect with your iPad as well, and then just use the iPad whenever you're doing things like that. So I try to steer them away from it. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. It probably would. It's just where are they going to be standing and where's the camera going to be? Do you know? You get into those situations.
We tried pushing them towards Zoom as well.
Yeah.
But I was curious to see if that would work.
Yeah. Just steer them in the opposite direction. Anybody else?
I've been experimenting with the Swivel.
Oh, yes.
So I'm kind of similar situation, purchased it with grant funding and then trying to inspire faculty to check it out. And I did have some success with whiteboards though. The way I'm pitching it is, record yourself in your natural environment. I did find that it was extremely engaging because it tracks your motion, and also you wear the microphone. So, but you still have to be relatively close to your whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
We had problems with glare, exposure. The iPod or the mobile device didn't take as good of a video image that professional cameras would. Anyway, I was just sharing anecdotally the Swivel. My question though was about the Panicast and the Meeting Owl. What's the proximity for capturing good audio from those?
So, yeah, the Owl's picking you up. So it does really well with audio. Panicast, it's more you're in like a maybe 8-foot range, I would say. Because I'm thinking when I use them in the Docheo Center, if I go too far behind the end of the table, then it's not picking me up anymore, or it's picking me up really, really low. So your range on that one is going to be much better. But usually with this, you're sitting around a table anyway. Now, I can tell, so that we do have swivels at the center too. We mostly use them to support K-12. Specifically, our movement sciences department uses them quite a bit because they teach in a gym setting or an outdoor setting, and they need to be able to track if they're going to record. The way I got faculty to bite on swivels when I first tried them is I was doing a presentation over at WSU. And I thought, I'm just going to take this with me and use it and show them that they could self-record their presentation without having anybody there, And so when I did that and they saw and they were like, oh, it just follows you. Yeah, it just follows you. Then people started to want to use it. So I find that too with any of these devices. Sometimes it's me looking at their research side instead of their teaching side first. And so I might tell somebody about the pivot heads because I know they're doing a research project where they need to capture things that are happening. And then they start to bleed that over into their teaching. So I think it happens naturally that way, but often it's the research piece first because that's the most important thing to them depending on how much of a research load they have. Any other questions?
Well, just microphone.
So out of all of these, if you had your rankings, what would your rankings be? If you were to buy one, then the other, then the third, and so on, what would your rankings be?
Okay, interesting. So I would buy the pivot heads first because I think there's so much flexibility with how they can be used, and the wide range of people I have using them currently is just crazy for so many different situations across the board that they're using them. So I would definitely say that that one's first. It's also, I mean, if I'm not looking at the smart version, which I don't suggest the smart version to a lot of people because of that live streaming issue, the original version works fine if really what you want to do is take pictures and record video. It's high quality, great video. So that would be my first choice. My second choice would probably be the Owl. Yeah, and it's just because it's such a unique, it gives you a very unique experience, I think, that people at the end don't typically get. So I think, that's definitely worth it to me. It's $800, but There's no other way I can give them that experience. You know, I think then I would probably go with the Panasonic and then the Hue. The Panasonic, it does, if you utilize the software on it, you can switch so that you're only focusing on one camera or the other, and it will, there's something that you can pay extra for called, I think it's Intelligent Zoom, and it will move to whoever's speaking out of the 3 cameras that are on it, so it does work in that way. Again, though, it's a higher price point, so I'm probably going to buy the OWL first. And figure out how to make it permanent. I don't know. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
How would you compare it between the owl and the swivel?
Between the OWL and the Swivel. Okay, so the Swivel to me is something that I'm going to look at when I'm looking for, let me see. So the OWL tracks, but it tracks from a central location, if that makes sense. The Swivel, I can put it on a tripod, and it will track me wherever I move in the room because I wear a little sensor. And so it goes wherever I go. So it's constantly following me, and it's not based on audio. It's based on the fact that I'm wearing a tracker. Swivels also have the ability to track more than one person now. They didn't used to, but they do now. There's also a camera that you can get, what is the name of it, that tracks, it does pre-program tracking, that you can have like 4 to 6 sensors, and you can say, I want to track this person for 5 minutes, and then when we get to the 5-minute marker, it's going to jump over here and track this person, and then it'll go to this person. And you do it by the number of the tracker. And so that's a really neat technology. Again, though, price, right? It's always your issue. Yeah, so there is quite a difference between those two.
Does the swivel require USB?
No, the Swivel works with an iPad. So you're basically putting the tablet, mounting it. You put the swivel on top of a tripod, and the swivel itself turns. The tripod doesn't turn. And then you put the tablet in a holder, and you can use a regular standard size or a mini. I've seen people use phones as well. Yeah. Wow, that was a good one.
What's your most common troubleshooting call with like the OWL or the Panavision?
Oh, normally it's, so the OWL and Panacast require a little download. And so it's usually like the faculty doesn't know where their downloads go and they click the button. Like, you know, when you, how many times do we run into that, right? They just don't know that, oh, it's up here on a Mac. This is where you're going to find it. So it's just little things like that, quite honestly. There was one time that somebody borrowed it and it needed the firmware update. And so I just made sure that it got the firmware update before it went out again. And they do push out firmware updates on those pretty frequently because it's a pretty new product still. So I have been getting a good bit of those, but it's also added a bunch of features that are nice. So.
And then how about Zoom? Because that's usually where we run across the most problems with any kind of cameras we're deploying. Is like once everybody has everything hooked up, it's then problems with the software and like the network, or you know.
Right. You know, I have to say, in comparison to every other video conferencing tool that we have used, I have so far not really had much trouble at all with faculty using Zoom. Zoom seems to be very intuitive to them. And as long as I give them little tips, if it's a faculty member that I know is going to have a challenge with Zoom, For instance, I will go into their settings menu and I will pin their tools to the bar so that they don't have to hover at the bottom of the screen for their tools to pop up. They're pinned down there, and they know, and I will walk them through things like, okay, well, if somebody comes into your meeting and they're making a lot of noise and tapping on a keyboard, you can control that. Here's what you do. So I just try to give them like the biggest tips possible to get them through the first couple times, and then they get really comfortable, and they get comfortable quick with that one. We used to use, oh wow, a variety. Adobe Connect. We had people using Skype, Google Hangouts. Oh, that Blackboard Collaborate.
I've avoided that one.
So BB Collaborate was, I got more grief over that than any of the other ones. I hate to say that. Blackboard itself, fine, but BB Collaborate, no. We actually, since we went to Zoom now, are trying to figure out how to weed that out, right? Because faculty they've abandoned it. They've absolutely abandoned it and do not want to use it anymore now that they have the comparison. So, in the back.
And I actually just have a comment. I just wanted to let you know that during the presentation, I actually had my boss buy an owl.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm not selling the owl, but we did find it online for $600. So I just wanted to update your price point on that.
Okay, so they have dropped in price
so they have
a
dropped
little
in price
bit?
by almost 20%. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
right?
That's
Well, I
great
didn't
to know.
want to. I was, yeah, but
They were
yeah,
right out
yeah,
here.
they're right out there. That's true. Through
Okay.
B&H. I wasn't going to advertise for anybody, but you made me now.
But so that's funny because I literally looked like last week and they were still at 800 because somebody asked me and I was
Right.
like, I think it's $799, and I went on
Yeah.
and it was still $799. So.
I promise I'm not a plant, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you have a contract with B&H, you'll find you have lower prices,
Oh,
even
yeah.
on stuff that is normally not on sale, like Macs, for example, or Owls, I guess. And then the other thing is, there may be a NAB sale going on still. So,
Maybe.
Or E&I, so if you're not set up with them, E&I, that would make a difference too.
Oh, okay.
For education and industry.
Right, and we're not. We are? Okay. Okay, so now we know. Next time. Thank you.
Of course.
Anybody else? All right, well, take a break and then go have a drink because it's that time of day. We're all getting tired, but thank you so much for coming.
How about drinking?